Please like and comment on the video below. That will allow me to produce better quality videos and more of them in the future.
So I thought we would use the first Premiership match of this season to have a look at the soccer profiling tool that we have in BetAngel called Soccer Mystic, and use that to have a look at how Lay the Draw may or may not pan out on this particular match this evening, because the reason that Soccer Mystic was developed was to allow you to have a deeper dig in a football match before the match has started. But you can use that in a number of different ways to either validate a strategy or to understand what risk you're taking or how the match could pan out, and it's worth doing. So let's have a look at it. The football specific tool is up here and on the right, and if we click on that, it will bring up what you see here. Now in the top right hand corner, what we do is we have a model that sits underneath this particular tool, but it tends to look at market data to construct it. So if you the little signal strength that we have up here tells you how flush the markets are, how liquid they are, and it will look at the market to confirm what it's looking at and derive some information from that. So if the number of bars up here are low, then you probably shouldn't be using it at all, but if the bars are around this level, then that's great. It's got sufficient information to have a look at the match. So what are we looking at on the screen here? Well, this graph down here is telling you how the odds will move based upon the home team, the away, and the draw. So if, for example, we just look at the draw specifically, we're actually looking at a probability chart. So the draw is starting at around 20% and it's getting more and more certain as the match progresses. You may not be familiar with looking at probability. So if you want to switch that off, you'll see that it looks at odds. So it gives you the odds at which it starts at, and you can see them gradually going down to 101. So what this is saying is that over the course of this match, if there are no goals scored, then eventually the draw will end up at 101, which is quite logical really. But what you're interested in is how will a goal affect the odds as the match progresses. You should note as well, as I move the crosshairs around, can you see it's mapping the odds? It's just a quick way of getting a visual reference as to where the odds are and what the odds are telling you at that particular point in time, because obviously you can't read that from the graph. You're going to have to move the mouse pointed at a particular area of the graph, and then you can look at the odds displayed underneath. So let's stick a goal in. Let's say it's a drab 0-0 first half, and then the first goal comes on 55 minutes. How will that affect the odds? Let's have a look at what's going to happen on the draw. You can click refresh here, or it will auto refresh for you. So if I click refresh, you can see that what happens here is the chance of the draw gets more and more certain, more and more certain, more and more certain, and it bottoms at about 55 minutes. It'll be around odds of sort of about 2.5 or so on, and then Arsenal score, and then the odds will go flying out. So if you want to calculate roughly what your position would be, what your potential trade value would be, click down here, click up here, and then it'll give you the difference in the bottom bit of the bar here. Don't know why I was struggling to say that. So what happens if actually, Leicester hold out for ages and then they score first in the 55th minute? Click on refresh again. Can you actually see what happens here? So the odds will come down, come down, come down, and then they'll bump out again, and then the chance of the draw sort of skirts off into the distance here. So if you actually start playing around with this, this will give you an idea of how the odds will change as the match progresses. Now one of the things you can see here is, can you see how flat and crunched up it is at the bottom? That's because we set the odds limit at 1000. So let's put that down to a smaller level. Let's put it down to 20 or something, and then we'll get a better view on what's going on here. So let us go back to that scenario where the goal was scored after 55 minutes. You can see here you've got a slightly easier representation of that, and this would be if Leicester score the away goal. So originally we started over here at these odds. Leicester score the goal first, and can you see the problem that you've got if you follow this crosshair across, for want of a better name? Can you see if I position that about where that goal is scored, can you see that there's a gap to where the starting odds were, so you would have lost money on that occasion. Now if I switch the away goal off and click on refresh, let's do the same thing again, by using the crosshair to look at the start odds and where that goal goes in and what happens to the price from there. So you can see anything above the crosshair indicates that you'll be in profit. Anything below indicates that you'll be at a loss. So let's actually find where that key point is within the market. So can you see that the earlier the goal arrives, the more chance you've got of being in profit, the bigger the amount of profit that you'll make on that particular match. The later it arrives, if that goal doesn't arrive until 75 minutes, can you see that you know, the amount of potential profit that you've got there is relatively small. And if we do the away goal, and we do that pretty late, you can see that well, you're pretty shagged there, because if that goal arrives and it's an away goal, then you can see that we're actually below the starting value, and therefore you would have to trade out for a loss. Let's see what happens if we move that forward to 25 minutes. In other words, we give Arsenal a chance to come back into the match here. So if we go here, then you can actually see that when the goal is scored at that particular point, you're well off at that particular moment within the match. The draw would actually contract in price. But can you see the way that the draw curves, and then around halftime and just after halftime it's at its low point. So this is with Leicester 1-0 up, and then you can start to see that the draw begins to regain its value. So if Leicester scored first and then held on for a long period of time and Arsenal couldn't get back into the match, the draw will actually cross back over a bit later in the match, but for a long period of time you will be out of the money significantly. So if we click here and then we click here to when that point is within the match that it crosses back, you can see you're going to have to hold your position for 54 minutes before the chance of getting your money back it becomes an opportunity. But what I'm doing here is I'm sort of talking around all the different scenarios. This is why we created this tool, is for you to have a play rather than you guessing or whatever. You can point at any particular match and just have a play and look at all of the different scenarios. Give yourself an idea. So you're sort of saying, well, I'm going to lay the draw and then I'm going to do this if that happens, and this if that happens, and if that happens I'm going to wait until this length of time, and so on and so forth. So the tool was originally created because we wanted to play around and have a go at all of these different scenarios and see what the impact would be. And eventually that idea, that concept made it into the product. And I suggest if you haven't looked at it, have a look at it and have a play around with it. One of the difficulties that you will always have with modeling is that you can't absolutely guarantee that it will be accurate, because anything could happen. But the idea is it just gives you a basis on which to play around and experiment and come up with strategies without having to risk any money in the market and spending hours looking at data or testing stuff. It just gives you an idea of what sort of strategies could or could not work given certain scenarios and given certain types of matches.